Good evening, it's 7 o'clock. Welcome Reverend Canon Dr. Bracegirdle. Would you please say prayers for us?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just before I say the prayer for the meeting tonight, I'm aware, I think, that this is the first council meeting since the tragic death of the former Mayoress, Gay Wharton. And as we come to this prayer, we just take a moment to remember Gay. And in this time of great sadness and loss, to remember her family, husband Stephen and Gay's sons Matthew and Adam. Madam Mayor, members of council, let us pray. Lord God, we give you thanks and praise for the freedom and safety in which we live, for peaceful homes, for justice and order in our society, for standards of truth and honour, and for all our rights and privileges. We pray for those whose work it is to maintain and extend those blessings, especially in this council, its elected members and officers. We pray for all who have authority and responsibility in administering the law and maintaining the peace, in education and the care of children, in planning and building and in providing both for work and leisure. Direct and use their influence that together we may build communities and neighbourhoods whose life does honour to your name by caring for others. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Canon Bracegirdle. Good evening, members of the council. It's time to start the meeting of the full council. Mrs. Ridge, would you please confirm whether we have any apologies for absence?
Councillor Iqbal has sent his apologies for absence, and I don't think there's anyone else that we're aware of this evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I am Councillor Mrs. Thomas, and I am the Mayor of Bolton for this municipal year, and I will be chairing this meeting. I would just like to begin by echoing some of the remarks from Canon Bracegirdle in his prayers about Gay Wharton, a former mayoress of this town who was excellent in the role. She was a great ambassador and enhanced the reputation of Bolton. She was also a great charity worker and fundraiser and did so much for so many in this town, especially the work that she did at Fort Alice, supporting women who went through domestic abuse. And I think the outpouring of love for her that's been shown since her tragic death goes to demonstrate just how much people thought of Gay, how respected, admired and cared for she was. And so I would like to begin with a minute to mark the tragic death of our former mayoress and very dear friend, Gay Wharton. Thank you very much, councillors. Gay's funeral is taking place at Overdale Crematorium on Friday the 4th of December at 12 noon. As the number of mourners is limited, Gay's family has asked that if you would like to pay your respects, please line this route to Overdale from the Retreat Restaurant on Chorley New Road and down Overdale Drive. Thank you. And thank you again from me and all members of the council to the people of Bolton who continue to make such positive contributions to the borough during this difficult time. And I'm sure that all members will want to join with me in congratulating the Environmental Services Behaviour Change teams who have won the Local Government Chronicles Best Service Delivery category 2020. Fantastic achievement. The teams have worked to decrease the amount of fly tipping from 4,000 incidents in 2014 to just over 1,000 in 2019. They've worked closely with residents and businesses to change how they deal with rubbish across the borough. So well done, fantastic to everybody involved. Just such a shame, once again, we can't have you in the chamber to give you a round of applause and recognise your achievement. Are there any declarations of interest? No? Nobody's indicating anyone.
Madam Mayor, the next item of business is to confirm the minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 14th of October 2020.
Are these approved?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Aye. Aye.
Madam Mayor, the next item of business is a motion in the name of Councillor Greenhalgh regarding the scheme of delegation.
Councillor Greenhalgh. Councillor Greenhalgh, I think you're on mute.
Apologies, Madam Mayor. I formally move that the amendments to the Council Scheme of Delegation for 2020 to 2021 be approved.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to second the motion as set out on the order paper.
Are these agreed?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Madam Mayor, the next item of business is a motion in the name of Councillor Greenhalgh regarding the quarterly reports on decisions taken using the special urgency provisions.
Councillor Greenhalgh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally move that the quarterly report on executive decisions made under the special urgency provisions as circulated be noted.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to second the motion as set out on the order paper.
Are these agreed?
Aye.
Aye.
Madam Mayor, the
Aye.
next item of business is a motion in the name of Councillor Dean regarding committee membership.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Can I please move that changes in committee membership and appointments to outside bodies be approved as on the order paper?
Councillor Curran.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second the motion.
Are these agreed?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The next item of business is to consider questions under Standing Order 9 bracket A.
The first question this evening is from Councillor Heslop.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I firstly say I hope the leader doesn't make reference to the Farnworth Master Plan in relation to the shortcomings in Kearsley. It seems to be used as a joker card recently when it comes to the services in Kearsley. I'll go on to the question. At the full council meeting of the 14th of the 10th, 2020, Councillor Zaman presented a question to the deputy leader that started off: the previous Labour council secured an investment of £100 million to regenerate Bolton town centre in 2017-2018. The reality is that the Labour Party did not secure an investment, but the permission for the council to borrow £100 million in the name of the residents of this borough. £5 million of which of the debt is being shouldered by the residents of Kearsley. Could the leader confirm the estimated value of the saleable assets in Bolton town centre once the master plan is completed? How much of the £100 million that has been spent or will be spent on public realm in Bolton town centre? And finally, whether Kearsley will receive any capital investment from any potential future proceeds of the saleable assets in Bolton town centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think you're muted, but I am.
What's going on? Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry.
I'd like to thank Councillor Heslop for his question. I think he's been a little bit unfair on Councillor Zaman, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think Councillor Zaman is entitled to say that it was the previous administration that took the decision to borrow £100 million in support of the town centre regeneration. It was put forward by the previous administration, but it was also supported right from the off by ourselves and other groups in the council. I think I just need to point out one thing to begin with, because I think councillors, I think that the question is predicated on it, and that is that the debt is not really secured by the council taxpayers as such, notwithstanding the exceptional circumstances that this year has brought. The debt is in effect been secured by the airport dividend, and by and large it's the users of the airport that will be supporting the financing of the £100 million rather than council taxpayers, and that's what made the original decision to borrow £100 million such a good one. In his question, Councillor Heslop is really asking two almost impossible questions to answer, and that is that's for us to estimate the asset values in 5 years' time of the assets that we're developing. I think that's particularly difficult because they're subject to contractual arrangements that we're not entered into yet. So it's really is impossible for either myself or officers, for that matter, to provide him with any accurate information regarding the value of assets in what could be at least 5 years' time. Again, he's asking us to estimate the value of public realm works. And it's difficult to do, but I'm quite happy to estimate that would be between £5 and £10 million, but a definitive figure will be available on completion of the town centre regeneration schemes, and we're quite happy to provide one once those works are completed. Councillor Haslam will be aware, Councillor Heslop will be aware that £12 million of the £100 million has been allocated and will be invested in our district centres, and a further £4 million was also pledged from the previous administration from the sales as assets that we're carrying out at the moment under the strategic asset management plan, and a significant amount of that will go to the Farnworth Town Centre regeneration project. I do find it incredibly odd that Councillor Heslop almost demands that we don't mention that. Quite a significant part of the Farnworth regeneration project is within his ward. Now he might think of himself as a councillor from Kersley, but his ward does straddle two areas of the town, and a significant amount of the money of the £60 million will be going into his ward, albeit the Farmworth part of it. And I think it's I'm trying to be generous about this, Madam Mayor, in that this was an initiative, by the previous administration, fully supported by ourselves, and the regeneration of Farmworth, which will attract tens of millions of pounds, will be a huge benefit for all residents in the southeast of Bolton, whether that be Farmworth, Kersley, Little Lever, Darcy Lever, Harper Green. It's going to be a tremendous investment and a show of confidence in the southeast of the borough. And I think it's just, well, slightly churlish of Councillor Heslop to ask us not to mention that. Undoubtedly, Madam Mayor, capital receipts will be received from the sale of assets when that comes about. That will be in a number of years' time, and when those receipts are received by the council, it will be up to whoever my successor is in future years to determine how they're allocated, and I'm sure they will allocate them taking into account the views of all councillors on Bolton Council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Weatherby.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now that the schools have returned following the October half term, it is a good opportunity to reflect on the handling of the free school meal provisions during that period. We all are aware that the Marcus Rashford bill was unsuccessful in the House of Commons on Wednesday, the 21st of October. Immediately that evening, there was a great community rallying in Kersley and Farmworth and across the boroughs to step in to ensure those children who are entitled to free school meals will get their lunches and not go hungry. On Saturday the 24th, that the Bolton News reported that the council would make funds available through the Bolton Fund and had set wheels in motion on Friday morning. This reporting was, of course, after the schools had broken up for the half term on Friday the 23rd. Can I ask the relevant executive cabinet member, one, if it was the council's intention all along to provide funds for the free school meals if the bill was unsuccessful, why was there no prior or immediate public announcement of this intention, like some other councils in the GMCA? This would have saved the people a lot of stress and worry, knowing things were already in place. Two, now that the government has changed their position and agreed to the funding of free school meals over the Christmas break, how does the council intend to implement this? Will it be via the voucher scheme that has been used previously, as this seems to be the procedure of choice for many Greater Manchester authorities? And three, what percentage of the funds made available for the free school meals via the Bolton Fund have been used by community organisations to provide meals, and what are the plans for any of the remaining funds? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weatherby. Councillor Galloway.
Am I on? Yes. Thank you for your question, Councillor Weatherby. With regard to the first part regarding help for children in vulnerable families for food during the autumn half term, there's already help out there all year round for vulnerable families. It's the priority for this council and for this administration, especially during the pandemic. And we've assigned a good proportion of the COVID financial support from the government to help families struggling during this time. We felt it was important to signpost where this help could be accessed during the half term. Our main food support for the half term was through the humanitarian response, which is accessed through our COVID hotline, which was set up at the beginning of lockdown. This offered food parcels to families in financial difficulties, and it was distributed through the food hub run by Urban Retreat. To make it easier for families needing to use it during half term, there was no need to complete the usual application process. And unlike some other GM authorities, the food parcels were available from the very start of half term. We also have food support through the local welfare provision scheme, which awards food packages to all those who meet the criteria. With regard to the question relating to supporting children in receipt of free school meals over the Christmas holidays, could I answer that when I respond to Councillor Donaghy, as he has asked the same question? Finally, regarding the percentage of funds made available for vulnerable families via the Bolton Fund, it is 58% of £130,000 in the fund, which has already been allocated to community groups and organisations. This leaves £95,000, which is available for groups to apply for until the end of March next year. And there will be additional funds available in the event that we need to have the fund replenished. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Galloway. Councillor Howarth.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I need to ask my question and just include a bit of commentary within it, Leader. Whilst I acknowledge the finance that the government has provided the country since March, the government has not been fair on the finances for Bolton at all, though. Government wanted Bolton to go into Tier 3 before this second country lockdown in an unfunded way, because the money stated was the same as councils in Tier 1 and in Tier 2 then. In Tier 1 and 2, their hospitality sectors weren't closed. Many more people could go out and earn a living. Before the second lockdown, Bolton had 3 weeks of Bolton-specific COVID restrictions in September, where all hospitality providers were restricted to takeaway only and closure between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. Bolton also had the 3 months of restrictions that Greater Manchester was placed in by the government, and that was, of course, to get on top of the disease. Some people in our borough have lost jobs, some closed small businesses. Self-employed and gig economy workers have suffered massively due to the demand downturn. The young are losing work in hospitality and retail, and many young people can't really get work now. Many jobs have been shed, and it is very hard for people. There are residents who are unable to qualify for the government finance schemes since March. That's for 8 months now. Government are just silent on the gaps. Self-employed workers, low-paid workers, agency workers. An estimate 10% for Bolton of the Greater Manchester excluded workers is 13,000, so plenty are in hardship here and not helped by the spending review. The social security system is now massively important here to support families and prevent undue hardship. I've nearly finished. At national level, Labour are lobbying hard to get numerous matters with the benefits system improved. A standout is that November 2020 marked 9 months since the start of the crisis, roundabout, and the benefit cap has kicked in for those families who claim universal credit. They claimed it when the crisis began. There's always been a grace period of universal credit to help those who've just lost work. It respects those who've had a job, basically. Just when people need the help from the government, this grace period is ending, Leader, and it's horrendous.
Councillor Howarth, have you nearly finished? You've had 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you so much. We want the government to properly fund the local welfare provision finance here in Bolton, and I'd be grateful to hear what's the plan to help by the role of this local authority to stave off the worst excesses of poverty to get through a hard winter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howarth. Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try and keep it as factual as I can, Councillor Howard. So in terms of support for Bolton businesses, In total, the government has provided an additional total since September of £40 million in funding for the council to allocate in grants. Specifically, these grants have been available for business forced to close through the restrictions during September 2020, whilst Bolton was in Tier 3 in October, and during the full lockdown between November 5th and December 2nd. Those payments, I want to pay credit to the teams that work at the council in terms of the finance teams, who got both the Tier 3 payment and the retrospective payment out in really quick time, and we rate as one of the finest within the whole GM conurbation of getting that money out to the businesses as soon as we possibly could, because we understand the predicament and the urgency required. Backdated funding for businesses affected by restrictions when Bolton entered Tier 2 in August has also now been provided, I said, as part of this overall amount, whilst a new grant scheme for businesses not eligible for funding so far, the additional restrictions grant, also known as discretionary grant, is due to go live the week commencing the 30th of November and is due to go live by the end of this week, I have assurances. The grants have been promoted and administered by council officers in the business rates and business Bolton teams and have benefited local companies across many sectors. Just want to say something about this discretionary grant. We've made every effort to address those businesses that have, as you identified, fallen through the cracks, not met the criteria in full, but where we generally acknowledge as councils that they have not been able to function and have suffered as a result. And we are producing a scheme which is very much keeping our options open and using that discretionary facility. So if businesses come under the radar that have simply not been there before, we are prepared and ready to address those, as long as obviously we find that they're not being able to access grants from elsewhere. And that is due to go live, are hugely important. As regards, you did imply as well that there has been no help for the self-employed, and of course there has, of course, and this again, I won't say that I would have liked the announcement to come a little sooner, but it did come eventually, and of course there is the self-employment grant scheme now available where businesses receive 80% of their profits from the previous year, and that is obviously live as we speak. On the subject of support for local residents, the council has the following programmes in place which will support residents during the winter: the local welfare provision scheme to support families with food, gas, electric bills and household items. The budget has been increased from the DEFRA grant to provide additional support through to the 31st of March 2021. Additional support will be available via the COVID Winter Support Grant for the period 1st of December to the 31st of March 2021 in the form of food and essential items. And I just want to refer a little bit to the response that my colleague gave previously to Councillor Weatherby. We funded right from the outset. It was one of the first decisions we made when the pandemic started. We Urban Outreach received a bulk amount to be able to start work immediately and start to address the problems, both when we knew that the vulnerable and those self-isolating would be affected. I want to stress this point, and this money has been kept going. We give them a yearly administration fee. I'll probably be going into more detail on this with the Councillor Cunliffe question later on, but it is important to recognise, and I want to also point out that we were ready to go with those children's meals quicker than any other GM authority. It's not quite accurate what Councillor Weatherby said, because the voucher scheme, and many of our neighbours used it, Bury used it, Tameside used it, I think Manchester used it. Actually, those vouchers were not landing till the Wednesday and Thursday of the half-term week. Our meals were available because of the relationship we have and because funding was already there with Urban Outreach to address the problem from the first Monday of the half term, from day one. So I think, you know, those and the take-up is there, the figures are there. and the money was already provided. So I just want to make that point. It's a hugely important point that needs making. The council will also be maintaining the humanitarian helpline and the response hub to coordinate all the offers of support. Businesses will continue to be supported by the council through the measures that have been implemented as part of the economic recovery plan, including the addition to free parking for up to 2 hours until June 21. That has been extended. Advice and support from the Business Bolton team on where to access government grant schemes and guidance, and regular e-newsletters and communications about assistance available for both businesses, employees. And I want to pay again credit to the
Can I just intervene?
staff.
Sorry,
Yes.
can I just intervene? You've had 5 minutes, Leader, have you? Could you draw it to a close, please?
Thank you. If I could just,
Thank you.
I'll just finish on this. Thank you to staff who have stepped up and really been there with advice and help. Much personal guidance has been done to many businesses, and I pay tribute to those staff who continue on a day-to-day basis to make the grant schemes a lot easier for businesses to understand. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you, Leader. Sorry to cut you short then. Councillor Sylvester.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the meeting of the Council on the 14th of October 2020, during the Cube Fire debate motion, Councillor Hewitt, in his role as Cabinet Member, twice stated that the Cube building is covered by the new Building Safety Fund. The video of the Council meeting clearly shows Councillor Hewitt saying, with regards to the Cube, the lessons learned are ongoing. In discussions with officers, the cladding used was a HPL, different from HCM style, but this type of cladding qualifies for the support package in residential properties over 18 metres. The Cube was constructed in 2 blocks. Block A, fronting Bradshawgate, does in fact have a floor above 18 and therefore eligible for funding. Block B to the rear may also be considered to fall within the tolerance, which is detailed within the prospectus, but that is for the owner and the developer to make their own inquiries, as the scheme is not administered by the local authority. Those were Councillor Hewitt's words. The fact, Madam Mayor, is that the Cube is not covered by the Building Safety Fund due to the arbitrary decision of the government to exclude all purpose-built students' accommodation. The fact is, Madam Mayor, that the prospectus for the Building Safety Fund specifically excludes purpose-built students' accommodation from eligibility. Page 9 of the prospectus has a table which lists what the fund will not cover. The table goes on to page 10 and states costs which would not otherwise be recovered from leaseholders through service charge provisions in their leases. Footnote 6 at the bottom of page 10 clarifies this. For example, purpose-built student accommodation uses are not eligible. There is nothing to exclude an application, but it would not succeed, Madam Mayor, under present government rules, hence the motion to widen the criteria to cover buildings such as the Cube. Does Councillor Hewitt still believe that the Cube building qualifies for remediation funding from this fund? If so, can he explain why? If he now understands that he was mistaken, will he apologise for misleading the Council? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sylvester. Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the Council, I thank the member for the question, but I must tell the member it was officer advice on this topic, and I've returned to officers to ask them to double check on the rules, and the officers stand by the advice they first issued. They say, unfortunately, the Labour Group's understanding is different from that of officers within the Council's building control team, who have confirmed that the cladding used on the Cube is of a type which would qualify for assistance from the Government Building Safety Fund. The latest version of the funding guidelines allow for a 30cm tolerance on applications for buildings under 18 metres and does not refer to owners of purpose-built student accommodation being excluded from applying for funding. Madam Mayor, they further reiterate the Council does not administer the grant funds or the building and has no role in determining the outcome of grant applications. Therefore, although the type of cladding and purpose of the building means the owner can apply for a grant, this does not necessarily guarantee that a grant will be payable. It is up to the owner of both to apply for the grant and establish eligibility. Councillor Hewitt's statement is therefore correct. Purpose-built student accommodation is eligible for grant funding. Madam Mayor, personally, I would like to thank those who attended the incident that night for their work last year. I witnessed firsthand that night the dedication and professionalism of those responders and council officers, and I would again like to thank officers for their work since in supporting those affected by it and all their work and technical advice on this issue.
Thank you, Councillor Hewitt. Councillor Donaghy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Obviously, back in August, the Health Scrutiny Committee passed a resolution that a special panel of inquiry should be set up to look into the effects of the COVID pandemic on the citizens of our borough, and in all aspects, of course, as to how that affected them. Now, notwithstanding the fact that I fully understand that capacity is at a premium in the authority at the moment, and I understand that our people are working extremely hard in a number of areas, it still falls to me as the chair of Health Scrutiny Committee to ensure that the wishes of committee are carried out. I further understand that to remove some medical staff in an inquiry situation, I beg your pardon, would not be productive, certainly at this time. However, I need to have some sort of timescale as to when an inquiry panel could be set up, because, you know, Madam Mayor and members, the least we owe the citizens of this town, the least we owe the people of Bolton, is an explanation as to how we handle this crisis. And we particularly owe that explanation to those who have lost loved ones in our borough to the COVID-19 pandemic. So if I could ask, following a meeting of the Health and Adult Services Scrutiny Committee on the 4th of August of this year, a meeting at which it was resolved to set up a special panel of inquiry into the impact of COVID-19 on the citizens of the borough, can the Chief Executive now inform the Council what progress has been made in the setting up of this panel, and when does he expect it to meet? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Donaghy. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Donaghy, for your question. It's really welcome. I know we had a previous conversation about this in the autumn, and I think the position remains much the same. I think the citizens of Bolton, first and foremost, want support, help, protection. They want us to run the humanitarian aid. They want us to make sure we get business grants out. They want to make sure that we're doing the testing regimes and requirements as are being currently discussed in terms of targeted testing. They want us to work with the NHS to protect those individuals in care homes, and I could go on with a lot of other activity that this council has been undertaking in addition to delivering services that the people of Bolton, the citizens you describe, truly want. At this point in time, there are no immediate plans to have this review because the pandemic has not finished. We were really pleased to wake up this morning to find out about the vaccine and the possibilities, but even this evening in the Bolton Gold Call, we know that there will be a lot of work to be undertaken to make sure that the delivery of this and the vaccination of our citizens and employees and all sorts of people, that it is done in the right way and in the right order. I think when the time is right, it will be down for politicians with obviously local councillors to work through and what this review, if it's going to happen, will be. And secondly, obviously, there might be a national review, which will be relevant for this council to take account of. But our first and foremost priority is the public, the protection of the public, their safety and welfare, the businesses of Bolton, and therefore on the basis of all those considerations, it's the right thing to do at the minute to carry on with our plans as I've described. Thank you, Councillor Donaghy.
Thank you, Chief Exec. Councillor Donaghy, another question.
muted, Councillor Donegal.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This question relates to the provision of school meals over the Christmas holidays. I noticed that Councillor Weatherby has had an earlier question, and I congratulate her on being pretty sharp off the starting blocks. But sometimes situations change, and I am reliably informed that the situation has changed, and I'm sure my colleague Councillor Galloway will elucidate when she makes her reply. My main concern is that at the half-term break, a number of people were not aware of the provision that was available at the time. And indeed, I had numerous calls from residents both in Tong Ward, my own ward, which I represent, and from other wards across the borough, asking how could they access this provision. So to avoid any confusion in future and to make sure that you don't have to be a member of the magic circle or indeed in the know to access this grant, could I ask that the Executive Cabinet member inform the Council what process will be used to notify parents about the provision of meals for children over the Christmas holidays, and will she agree with me that it is imperative that no child who is entitled to this provision is overlooked? And could I ask please that the Bolton News correspondent publishes her reply in full, please? Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was just sorry, I'm unsure if you were muted or not. Carry on, Councillor Galloway.
Thank you, Councillor Donegal, for your question, which Councillor Weatherby has also asked. The guidance from government regarding the £170 million COVID winter grant scheme to support children and the most vulnerable through the winter came out last week. And since then, council officers have been working hard to organise the logistics of getting the help to those most in need. Our allocation in the borough of Bolton is £1,110,800, and it is intended to help those in need with the cost of food, energy and other essentials. At least 80% of the total funding is to go to support families in need with children, but as the local authority, we have the discretion to use up to 20% of the funding to target other households. For example, vulnerable individuals or households with vulnerable young people. It is intended that the main rollout will be in the form of digital or paper vouchers for the 12,000 or so children who are eligible for free school meals. And that will be £40 per child to cover the Christmas break and £20 per child to cover the week at February half term. This will be administered by schools directly. In addition, we are using the funds to send out as the council paper vouchers to all families who are in receipt of council tax support and have preschool children and young people aged 16 to 18 living at home. We will also be increasing the local welfare provision budget, which will allow us to provide any additional support to families who need emergency help. And there will be ring-fenced budgets to support care leavers, troubled families and the homeless with food provision and essentials. As you can see, we have been careful as the council to ensure that financial help is available to a wider group than just families in receipt of free school meals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Galloway. Councillor Sherrington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is, the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock MP, who is the Secretary of State for Health, made a pledge that visits to every care home in the country would be possible before Christmas. The National Care Forum has called on the government to double the 546 million that they have made available, as this is not enough if they are serious to make relatives and friends linked up with their loved ones at Christmas. They are asking the care homes to, yet again, prop up the government's ideals. Liz Kendall MP, Shadow Care Minister, said despite promises to ensure families' visits can resume before Christmas, the government have not backed up that with the resources to make that happen. How are our care homes going to deliver this for their residents without the money needed to make it possible? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sherrington. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sherrington, for the question and the opportunity to explain what we, as a council, along with our partners, are doing with regards to close contact care home visiting. The initial information on COVID-19 testing of care home visitors was only made available to the council in the middle of last week, with more guidance being received last night, which we, at both GM and local levels, are currently reviewing before we can issue any formal guidance to our partners. The council is working closely with our local care homes to keep them informed and to help them prepare for any national rollout. Last Friday, the 27th of November, the council's commissioning team, along with colleagues from Public Health and Infection Control, hosted a webinar which was open to all care homes, and they shared the initial briefing material we had received to all homes. It must be said, for most homes, this was the first time they had any detail on how this programme of testing is supposedly going to work. There are huge workforce implications linked with the testing programme, and it's fair to say that our care home partners expressed some concern about how they would be able to resource and deliver this to all relatives regularly, but more importantly, safely. However, the aim of our briefing was to raise awareness in the first instance and to allow time to plan and prepare for the implementation. The council has already distributed £5 million from the Infection Prevention Control grant sent by the government to help fund the care sector. This has been targeted to support homes with increased staffing, reducing movement of staff between homes, and has been used to help facilitate pod and window visiting. It's too early to say what the exact financial implications will be for homes to introduce lateral flow testing and contact visiting, but it's clear that more resources will be required to minimise any risks and to facilitate this initiative safely. At this present time, I have asked our Directors of Adult Services and Public Health to advise the sector to delay implementing lateral flow testing until detailed work can be undertaken with homes to offer this safely for their residents and their loved ones. There are a number of practical, clinical, legal and resource implications for providers that need to be addressed and worked through before lateral flow testing and close contact visits can commence. To be most effective, the lateral flow testing has to be done by a trained member of staff. If it's not, then the effectiveness of the test drops significantly. So it is clear that if the test is not performed correctly, that undue risk could enter our care homes, which obviously none of us want. Our primary aim, along with partners, must be the safety and protection of the residents that homes have been entrusted to look after, along with their staff and of course the family members wishing to visit.
Our officers have worked closely with the homes to facilitate pod and window visiting as a priority, and 34 homes are now undertaking these visits. We will seek to test our approach with homes who are unable to offer these types of visits as a priority. I can assure the council that reconnecting families with their loved ones is a priority for not only this council, but also our partners. But we must ensure that this is done safely, even if this means it may not be fully operational in all homes until the new year. After today's recovery meeting, I asked that the letter that we sent to all care homes earlier today be copied to all councillors, so you are aware of the council's current position and what we are doing to ensure contact visiting is not introduced into Bolton care homes until myself, along with Councillor Baines and the directors of Adult and Public Health, are absolutely sure that when it is, it will be done in a safe and effective manner to protect everyone involved. I can assure the council that we will continue to lobby government by the Greater Manchester ADAS and Public Health Networks, the LGA, and by all political channels open to us as a cabinet to resource this initiative to ensure it's safe for everyone concerned. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe in the principle of 20-mile-an-hour limits in residential areas. Where properly done, they're proved to save lives and reduce harmful emissions. We have spent a lot of money on these schemes in Bolton, at least £850,000 and probably nearer £1 million. We paid for several in Smithills from the Area Forum budget before there was a general rollout. Before making the decision, I twice asked the previous Police and Crime Commissioner for assurances that there would be some enforcement and resultant publicity. I was assured that within the limits of police resources, that would happen. It never has. As we found out later, even before these conversations and before the general rollout of 20-mile-an-hour limits in Bolton, the police were following the ACPO speed enforcement guidance, which meant no enforcement. The rollout has signage, but virtually no physical features. As a result, it is not enforced and is largely ignored by most drivers. I would therefore like to ask the Executive Cabinet Member the question as printed on the order paper, and particularly the bit at the end. Does the Executive Cabinet Member consider the introduction of the widespread 20-mile-an-hour limits, which would neither have the physical features nor be enforced by the police, was largely a waste of money? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. Councillor Haslam.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hayes, for your question. When anyone asks me what the most important challenge in the highways portfolio is, I always answer without hesitation that it is road safety. Road safety to protect the lives of all road users, whether motorists, cyclists or pedestrians. And speeding is a major cause of injury and worse on our roads. Therefore, I believe that any measures which are an aid to managing excessive speeding and thus protecting our citizens are worthwhile. This council has introduced a borough-wide network of 20 miles an hour speed limits throughout Bolton. This was done with the support of all parties. It is therefore a surprise and a worry that a councillor should consider that any investment in road safety is largely a waste of money. Anything which encourages drivers to act responsibly is a good thing and cannot be viewed as irresponsible investment. Police guidance on speed enforcement measures has varied and includes both national through ACPO and local force recommendations. GMP police have responded that the guidance remains, and I quote, "Traffic authorities are asked to keep their speed limits under review with changing circumstances and to consider the introduction of 20-mile-an-hour zones and limits over time in urban areas, which are largely residential, to ensure greater safety for pedestrians and cyclists." This Conservative Council have road safety as one of our major priorities, And only last week, the Cabinet had an in-depth discussion at our instigation with GMP police officers and raising our and our residents' concerns with them. We discussed community speed watch and the possible purchase of handheld cameras which can be used by PCSOs and shared across the borough. This is a part of an ongoing initiative into improving road safety in Bolton. Nationally, there is a lobby to reduce the default speed limit to 20 miles an hour rather than 30. This would not have to expect physical measures to be introduced on every road. Indeed, they would not be appropriate on many roads. As councillors know, they're not always universally welcomed by residents, as evidenced by the consultations the council has carried out over time in Bolton. It is worth noting, however, that GMP have already carried out speed enforcements in Bolton in the 20 mile an hour area of Bolton, and we encourage and request them to do more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haslam. Councillor Hayes again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thank Councillor Haslam for that reply, and I have no doubt of his own commitment to road safety. Nevertheless, I think money might have been better spent on some physical features rather than on something which looks like more like a PR stunt. But let's go on to the other question. I'm getting more and more casework about vehicles driving at excessive speeds, not just a few miles an hour over the limit, but often massively in excess. I'm sure that Smithills is not unique in having these problems. They exist on nearly every road in the borough. The police are unable to properly enforce on any roads, not just those with 20 mile an hour limits. Speed cameras help, but the criteria for installing them are quite strict. They do not deter the many who may be using drugs, be uninsured and without licences. Speedwatch, despite what Councillor said, seems to have stalled, hence the answer we got at the last council, or didn't get at the last council. Fines and bans for those caught seem totally unrelated to the danger those drivers cause to others. The only real solution appears to be physical features like chicanes and proper speed humps, not just the pads, which have hardly any effect. I know that finance will be a problem, particularly at this time. I know there will be opposition, some of it very legitimate, but we do need to do something to save lives. If the Executive Cabinet member cannot agree to my request, can I ask what other solutions he has? Madam Mayor, I ask the question on the order paper.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. Councillor Haslam.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hayes, for this question also. I've got a lot of sympathy with the sentiments behind this question, and speeding is a very big worry to us and to all residents of Bolton. And council members and officers have regular dialogue with GMP on this matter, and I've already referred to the special meeting we had last week with senior police officers about this. GMP have recently introduced a new reporting portal where areas concerned can be directly registered with them, and they have carried out several days of action in the Bolton area. The most recent after the serious and tragic accident in the Smithills ward. Bolton Council have a specific policy to determine traffic calming need. The Calming Assessment and Prioritisation System, CAPS. This works by assessing locations across the borough by taking into consideration different factors, such as the number of injury accidents in the last 5 years, the types and severity, vehicle speed and volumes, the number of properties in each location and local pedestrian generators, amongst many other factors. From this, a matrix score is derived so that any street in the borough can be ranked and assessed on an even measure. This system can be used to determine the priorities for interventions if and when funding is available. Bolton Council continue on a regular basis to lobby GMCA for capital funding for local safety schemes and throughout the integrated transport budget settlement that comes from the TFT, and we shall continue to do so. However, this has been linked to major transport schemes in its entirety for several years. Of course, in view of the priority we all attach to road safety, we will continue to support pursuing funds from any and all sources for appropriate speed management measures. The safety of our residents on our roads is as important for this administration as it is for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haslam. Councillor Cunliffe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We all appreciate various groups throughout Bolton providing support to the growing number of residents financially affected due to coronavirus. Many organisations, including church members, community group, businesses, individuals, have dug deep into the pockets and given the precious time to help in this ongoing crisis. Many have gone the extra mile and they all deserve this council's recognition. I was certainly pleased when our mayor recently recognised their efforts with a personalised individual certificates that were really appreciated. The reason why I have themed my question around urban outreach is because they in particular work in close partnership with this council, and I've been asked exactly what financial assistance urban outreach have received from the council throughout this crisis to help them provide this vital service for our town residents. Hence my question. Urban Outreach, working with other members of Bolton family, have been coordinating the humanitarian hub, which has been feeding thousands of people every day prior to and throughout the pandemic and lockdown. I would ask if we could put on record our thanks to the organisation, their immediate partners and their volunteers, and our appreciation for the work they do on behalf of our town. Recently, they were asked to deliver lunches for young people on free school meals in the half-term holidays, for which they recompensed by the council via grant funding through the CVS. Could the leader of the council inform this council how much other funding has been directly allocated to the Urban Outreach Food Hub to enable them to distribute to those in need throughout our town? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cunliffe. The leader of the council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the question, Councillor Cunliffe. A range of community organisations, including Urban Outreach, have been working in partnership with the council since April, both with council money and from COVID support grants received from government to provide a humanitarian response for Bolton residents. Urban Outreach provide the council's food hub and have been supporting residents with food provision both as part of the humanitarian response and via the council's local welfare provision scheme. Food provided through local welfare provision scheme is directly funded by this council, including £30,000 per annum funding to Urban Outreach to cover administration costs. At the beginning of the pandemic, as I alluded earlier, £20,000 was front-loaded from the local welfare provision scheme's budget to enable Urban Outreach to purchase necessary food stocks at a time when demand was high. More recently, a further grant of £50,000 has been awarded to Urban Outreach via the Bolton Fund to ensure food stocks remain sufficient as we move into the winter months. And it was from this £50,000 that the money came from to provide the school meals. As at the end of October, we had supported 1,225 residents with food provision via the COVID helpline and awarded 1,449 food parcels via the council's local welfare provision scheme. Urban Outreach will continue to be a valued partner, working in partnership with the council to ensure the residents of Bolton continue to be supported through these difficult times, as will many other organisations who do some very valued work regarding food poverty in the town. And that is why we provided, through the flexibility of the Bolton Fund and through the JSNA, we provided additional grant support to those to be able to supply to address food poverty over the last month. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Leader. Councillor Hornby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This council is facing the hardest cuts possible since the formation of Bolton Metropolitan Borough Council back in 1974. Each year, the decisions get harder and harder to make. As a council, we all, no matter what political party we are from, try our best to ensure we keep the council tax increases to as little as we possibly can. Each year, we also see the precept we have to pay the Mayor of Greater Manchester increase way above the rate of local councils across Greater Manchester, and each year the reserves that Greater Manchester holds increases. But I ask the Leader of the Council, does he agree with the increases way above the increases of Bolton Council that the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, makes, and could he tell us, tell this council the current reserves that are held at GM level, and could he furthermore tell us what steps are being made by him to get back some of the money this council has paid over many years? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hornby. Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hornby, for the question. I doubt that he is a regular viewer of the GMCA meetings that do get live broadcast on a Friday morning every 4 or 6 weeks, as it were. But if he was, he will have seen me raise this on numerous occasions. Indeed, it actually got some pretty strong coverage in the Manchester Evening News when I did raise it. I'm not sure it was in the Bolton News, but it certainly did appear in the MEN, where and I was supported by a number of Labour leaders as well. It was while the Mayor of Greater Manchester was saying that the funding was not enough that was coming from government, and that we needed more. And at this stage, I think we were between tranche 1 and tranche 2 of the funding that was coming to the council. So I think every council leader in the land was still saying that we needed more at that stage. But I also raised the point, which is the point that Councillor Hornby brings up tonight, was that it is also very important that at a time when we as a local authority, and indeed local authorities across the whole of Greater Manchester, are facing huge financial challenges and having to make some very difficult decisions, it is also hugely important that Greater Manchester Authority and the Mayor of Greater Manchester looks at the books within GMCA and looks at what reserves can be returned to the authorities. This is our money. Many of them are coming back to us, and there is some good news in shortly arriving in terms of waste reserves and pooled business rates. But the issue of whether there are certain schemes that will inevitably cost us as local authorities, and indeed cost our residents money in terms of the mayoral precept moving forward, whether these are priorities and financial loads that we want to take on at the moment. Are these priorities absolutely necessary in a current COVID climate, when we are trying to get through a pandemic, when our economy will be recovering, and we have schemes that were very essential, very worthwhile pre-COVID, but are they as essential now when they are multi-million-pound schemes that will cost us as local authorities and cost our residents in precepts a lot more? So I agree wholeheartedly, and I will continue to raise it. It is raised often in leaders' meetings, and there is cross-party agreement on that. GMCA, and I won't quote directly a very famous Labour leader within the GM conurbation, I won't quote him directly, but he certainly gave the impression we were having a little paddle in the pool rather than going for a deep dive into what was available to come back to local authorities. And I wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment. There are considerable tens of millions of pounds of reserves earmarked for projects, as I say, in various spheres within departments at GMCA. Albeit when that gets split down between 10 authorities, it becomes a lot lesser amount per each authority. But I will continue to raise the issues, and I hope we will be able to have debates within this council chamber, and not just in this council, but in numerous committees. And I hope we can come to some cross-party agreement and how we can move forward in saying to GM, these for Bolton are not currently our priorities, bearing in mind all the very difficult decisions we are currently having to face as an authority financially. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Hornby again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As members will recall, the other day was Lancashire Day, and some time ago a question from our most Lancastrian of them all on the council, Councillor Walsh, was tabled asking that the Lancashire roads be added to certain street signs across the borough, especially at the borough boundaries. Could I ask the Executive Cabinet Member for Highways and Transport, has any progress been made with this? And could I make a plea whilst I'm doing that and ask him, whilst on the subject of boundary signs, ask Councillor Haslam if he can look into the whereabouts of one of our boundary signs on the boundary between Bolton and Bury on Stopes Road in Little Lever, saying welcome to Little Lever, which was has a Little Lever coat of arms on it saying welcome to Little Lever, and was paid for via Little Lever District Centre funds monies about 3-4 years ago, and it seems to have vanished. I wonder if you can look into that and give us some feedback as to what's happened to it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hornby. Councillor Haslam.
Haslam, you're on mute.
Apologies. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hornby, for your question. It was, of course, Lancashire Day on November 27th, commemorating the day in 1295 when Lancashire first sent representatives to Parliament. As a proud Lancastrian myself, who was born in the County Palatine and lived all my life here, I celebrate the day, and like this council, fully supported as a Councillor Walsh's motion that the Lancashire roads be incorporated onto new signs across the borough. I am pleased to report that the new signage policy will be implemented as borough boundary signs are replaced or new ones created, as is the case of the new signs now being planned for the Farnworth and Kersley. Councillor Hornby, I am pleased to report that I have received confirmation from officers that there is a welcome to Little Lever sign in storage at the Highways depot. This was due to be erected, but subsequently not done when a new borough sign was planned for the same site. Highways officers will now take this up with the team dealing with the Little Lever district centre programmes to determine the current course of action to be taken. And this will of course be done in conjunction with the ward councillors. I am personally in favour of local signage, identifying all the constituent parts of our borough. Each has its own identity, each is unique, and each should be celebrated. I look forward to seeing the Welcome to Little Lever sign in a position of prominence in the village very shortly. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, the next item of business is to deal with the minutes of the proceedings of the Planning Committee.
Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, members of the council, I beg to move the minutes of the proceedings of the Planning Committee held on the 15th of October and 12th of November 2020.
Councillor Ayub. Councillor Ayub. Oh, Councillor Ayub, you're on mute.
Yes.
Could you unmute yourself?
Apology.
Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I formally second the proceeding of the planning committee meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ayub. Are these agreed?
Aye.
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 Madam Mayor, the next item of business is to deal with the minutes of the proceedings of the licensing committee.
Councillor Mrs Fairclough.
Madam Mayor, I move that the proceedings of the meetings of the Licensing and Environmental Regulations Committee held on the 3rd of November 2020 be approved.
Councillor Dean.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, can I please formally second?
Are these?
Aye.
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 Thank you, Madam Mayor. The next item of business is to deal with the minutes of the proceedings of the scrutiny committee.
Councillor Donaghy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could I move that the proceedings of the scrutiny committees as outlined on the order paper before us be approved?
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second the minutes of this meeting. Thank you.
Are these agreed?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. The motion is carried.
Madam Mayor, we now move to motions under Standing Order 4. Councillors Howarth, Sherrington, Newell, Murray and McKeon have all withdrawn their motions as appeared on the summons for this meeting. Therefore, the next item of business is to consider a motion in the name of Councillor Beavers related to the use of fireworks.
Councillor Vivers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. And I realise this motion leaves me wide open to accusations of being something of a killjoy and, being a Liberal with intrinsic Liberal values, proposing anything that advocates top-down restrictions on the individual and the community doesn't sit easy with me. But I believe the right to do anything ends when exercising that right infringes on the rights of others. And we all know that fireworks can be, and often are, extremely invasive. The bangs, the pops, the sizzles frequently violate the right we have to peace and quiet. And we can't forget that this very chamber, virtual though it is to most of us now, we as members recently passed a motion in favour of tackling climate change, and so it would be remiss of us to ignore the impact that fireworks have on the environment, as well as the obvious threat they pose to people, to animals and to property. Now, I'm not suggesting this motion will in any way reverse global climate change, but it's very much in keeping with the environmentally friendly spirit of that motion I refer to. And we're all environmentalists now, at least if we're not, we soon will be. And now for the science bit. When the fireworks explode, they discharge nitrogen oxide, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, heavy metals and particulate matter. Not things you want to be willingly taking into your lungs, particularly if you are asthmatic or susceptible to heart or lung disease, or if there just happens to be a once-in-a-lifetime contagion that targets the respiratory system. And many of the toxins they release never fully decompose or disintegrate, but rather hang around in the environment. And there are many, many studies on how chemistry and physics combine to produce these fleeting, transient pyrotechnics. And whilst it would be fascinating, or it might even be boring, to go further into detail, the bottom line is that what goes up must come down, and what comes down pollutes our air supply and our water supply, particularly during large-scale cultural and religious celebrations. And we all know that every year the RSPCA fields hundreds of calls regarding distressed animals. The giant bang that accompanies a firework averages between 120 and 150 decibels. They literally terrorize our pets. It's no surprise that we have seen a sharp increase in the noise anxiety treatments administered to dogs. Around 40% of dogs are fearful of loud noises, meaning thousands of animals have their lives made a misery by random fireworks. And we're constantly reminded that we live in the age of social media, and we've all seen the videos of people's pets quaking in the corner on bonfire night or New Year's Eve. And it's not just pets, it's farm livestock, it's wildlife. It's also veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, who often find that fireworks provoke their symptoms. And then there's antisocial behaviour to consider. Unfortunately, a small minority of people use fireworks irresponsibly. It might just be setting them off late at night with no regard to the noise nuisance this causes, but there are those who use them as weapons to damage property and in extreme cases intentionally terrorise and injure people. But it's because I'm not actually a killjoy and I'm most definitely a Liberal that this motion isn't in any way designed to prohibit the use or the sale of fireworks, but rather one that encourages a more considered approach to their application. Firstly, proposes that a public awareness campaign across the borough highlighting the real and the potential impact of fireworks on the community, including the precautions that can be taken to mitigate risk. Secondly, it seeks to ensure that all public firework displays within the borough are advertised far enough in advance to enable residents to take any necessary precautions to safeguard their pets and to minimise anxiety within neighbourhoods, particularly for elderly and vulnerable members of society. And thirdly, it asks that retailers take more responsibility than that which they are currently obliged to do under existing laws, in particular to apply Challenge 25 scheme to the sale of fireworks, much in the same way as it's used in the sale of alcohol, but also separating quieter fireworks from the louder fireworks, and so providing the consumer with a clear choice. I am both pleased and relieved to finally get this opportunity to put this motion before Council. Madam Mayor, I move the motion as on the order paper.
Thank you, Councillor Vivers. Councillor Bagnall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
Right, I have two speakers today. Councillor Mrs Fairclough.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I suppose I should start off by congratulating Councillor Vivers on finally getting this motion to the council meeting. I know he very gallantly moved aside at the last council meeting in order for other motions to be put forward, but sadly he missed the big one, didn't he, really, the bonfire night. But as he said, we will be seeing them at New Year's Eve. In fact, in some places I think they haven't actually stopped. I for one will be more than happy to support this motion, and I'm sure that the Conservative group will join me. In all honesty, I think the council does recognise the issue regarding fireworks, particularly safety. Of course, animals, elderly people, people of a nervous disposition, and we have a range of measures already put in place, and I have checked with this. Every year we have an annual programme which changes slightly to address the current needs, but it's a multi-agency initiative. It's aimed at risk reduction, enforcement, reassurance, and as I say, it's refreshed each year to reflect the concerns or dangers of the time. Trading standards conduct intelligence-led programmes on test purchases, attempts for illegal sales to children, and we provide compliance advice to all known sellers of fireworks. With that's a focus on the independent retailers, pop-up shops, etc., and those wholesalers who also retail to the public. And we already promote the Challenge 25 sale of fireworks. We also investigate any reports of illegal fireworks, and these are the ones I think that do the most damage, including those that allegedly breach the maximum permitted noise level for fireworks that are on sale or that are not EC marked. We also secure the removal from sale of any identified stocks of illegal or banned fireworks. I welcome the request to look at promoting the sale of quieter fireworks. These are readily available, and I believe, I'm not an expert on this, but I believe that they are just as attractive to watch, but they lack the bang, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that's often frightens the animals, wildlife, children, and some of us adults as well. And it's not new. In fact, certainly abroad, it is quite common for silent fireworks to be used, including in Italy, where it was brought in a law that all fireworks had to be silent because they are very, very fond of fireworks, and often they are going off on almost a daily basis. And I certainly wouldn't be averse to supporting that in Bolton. So I'll keep it relatively brief. We are happy to support this, and as I say, congratulations on getting the motion to the front of the queue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Fairclough. Councillor Newall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm loath to start speaking by saying I'm not a killjoy, but I'm not a killjoy, but there's an awful lot in what Councillor Vivas has said that's true. I am a pet owner, and I have seen firsthand the misery that some fireworks, not all fireworks, can cause. It's not just pets. You know, I have a friend who is an ex-serviceman and suffers from PTSD, and fireworks affect him very badly. So there's a lot to consider here, and I think probably the problem that we face now is a lack of consideration with fireworks. I agree with what's already been said. From October to New Year's Day, you can have a constant stream of fireworks, you know, every weekend. And at the risk of causing a fit of the vapours in certain quarters of the chamber tonight, I'd like to mention and talk about the EU and what the EU do about fireworks. And they have a policy, and their policy is aimed at harmonising and standardising the member states' policies with the regulation of production, transportation, sale and consumption, and the safety of products, which is paramount. And they introduced proposals to harmonise the international trade and the international use of fireworks. There are 4 categories. The first category, the fireworks pose very little threat or danger, things like sparklers, fireworks that are intended for use in enclosed spaces and outside in residential areas, and they can be bought by children aged 12 years and above. Second level pose little danger, but for outside use, and you have to be 16 to buy them. Third is average danger, which can be used in large open spaces, and you have to be 18 to buy them. And finally, they have a section which is called grave danger, and they are only intended for use and can only be bought by people with specialist knowledge. And what's frightening really is these fireworks, this grade of firework, are regularly used by non-professional people in this country. So, you know, I don't think that can be right. There are environmental issues, there are safety issues. I remember when we used to have these shock advertisements that went out in the months before bonfire night to show children what could happen, and that kind of shock tactic does work. But back to Europe. Now that we have taken back control, perhaps we could also set an example with regard to this issue by picking out the best bits of legislation and applying them to British fireworks for the safety of all our residents. So I am happy to support Councillor Vivas and this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newell. Councillor Bagnall, do you want to reply now?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Mayor. My heart's quite warmed by what's been said this evening. And this motion is not about introducing draconian measures to curtail the fun and spectacle of fireworks. It's about trying to change attitudes and behaviours to limit the suffering of vulnerable members of our society and the animals. And I simply ask all members to support it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bagnall. Councillor Vivers, do you wish to use your right to reply?
I've nothing much to add to what the council have already said, and I hope everybody in the chamber can support this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The Chief Executive will now take a named vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So here we go. Councillor Baines.
For.
Councillor Connor.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Connor.
Sorry.
Councillor Cox.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
For.
Councillor Dean.
For.
Councillor Fairclough.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Galloway.
For.
Councillor Greenhouse.
For.
Councillor Haslam.
For.
Councillor Hewitt.
For.
Councillor Morgan.
For.
Councillor Muslim.
For.
Councillor Parkinson.
For.
Councillor Radcliffe.
For.
Councillor Walsh.
For.
Councillor Warren.
For.
Councillor Wilde.
For.
Councillor Abdullah.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Adia.
For.
Councillor Ayub.
For.
Councillor Donaghy.
For.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor Howard.
For.
Councillor Ibrahim.
For.
Councillor Karam. Councillor Karam. I'll come back in a second, Councillor Karam. Councillor McKeon.
For.
Councillor Mystery.
For.
Councillor Morris.
For.
Councillor Murray. Councillor Murray.
For.
Councillor Peel.
For.
Councillor Sherrington.
For.
Councillor Sylvester.
For.
Councillor Zaman.
For.
And I'll go back to Councillor Karam. You're on
For.
mute. Thank you,
For.
Councillor Karam. Thank you very much. Councillor Bagnall.
For.
Councillor Eckersley Fallon.
For.
Councillor Hayes.
For.
Councillor McGeehan.
For.
Councillor Newell.
For.
Councillor Vivers.
For.
Councillor Wilkinson.
For.
Councillor Flitcroft.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Sanders.
For.
Councillor Weatherby.
For.
Councillor Darvish.
For.
Councillor Ishmael.
For.
Councillor McMulkin.
For.
Councillor Brady.
For.
Councillor Wright.
For.
Councillor Heslop.
For.
Councillor Waters.
For.
Councillor Gibbon.
For.
Councillor Hornby.
For.
Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Bullock.
For.
Councillor Cunliffe.
For.
The motion is carried. Madam Mayor, the next item of business is to consider a motion in the name of Councillor Heslop relating to retail gift aid schemes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the Council. Members will be familiar with gift aid declarations that taxpayers complete when making regular donations to charities. These declarations allow the charity to claim 25% tax back from the HMRC on donations made by tax-paying donors. In addition to the regular donations made by individuals by, say, standing order or direct debit, charities, community groups and good causes raise funds through traditional cash collections, often when charity volunteers are passing around a bucket or a can. And HMRC recognise that these charities may be losing out because it is likely that most of these cash donations come from taxpayers, but it is simply impractical to obtain gift aid declarations for such donations, such small amounts. The Gift Aid Small Donation Scheme allows charitable and voluntary groups up to £2,000 per year back from the HMRC based on all these small cash donations being added together over the year and equaling or exceeding £8,000. As an extension to the main gift aid scheme, the retail gift aid scheme is used when people donate clothes to high street charities, and this enables these traditional charities to act as an intermediary and claim 25% tax back on the value amount of the item the clothing sold, based on the fact that the person who dropped the bag of clothes off at the shop, the donor, is a taxpayer. Both the Gift Aid Small Donation Scheme and the Retail Gift Aid Scheme came about because HMRC recognised that charitable giving had taken place and that the main Gift Aid Scheme could not accommodate these situations under the normal scheme rules. It should be noted, by the way, that the HMRC does have checks in place for claims made by charities. At our supermarkets, many generous shoppers buy food items and sanitary products, and after paying for these items, place them in the food bank trolleys on the other side of the checkouts, which in turn are passed on to the food banks by the supermarkets. Had the shopper placed in the trolley the cash value of the food that they had donated instead of the food itself, the food bank would be able to claim an extra 25% tax back under the Gift Aid Small Donation Scheme. I have been informed that because the food is not bought by the person who goes to the food bank for their food parcel, and that it was not actually cash that was donated, then these types of donations cannot be accommodated under the previously mentioned variants of the Gift Aid scheme. I firmly believe that food banks represent one of the most effective forms of traditional charitable giving, and along with community organisations ensure that there are virtually no overheads for employing people, as most of the work done in distributing the food is done by local volunteers. However, I am sure that a food bank gift aid scheme would help food banks with such things as refrigeration, storage, security, and perhaps a small van. It is increasingly clear that food banks offer a safety net for the many families that are unable to get by under the current system and in these exceptional times. And I believe that it is vitally important that the government facilitates these organisations to ensure that people facing real hunger are not being left behind. Although up to £2,000 tax back through a food bank gift aid scheme would very much help the food banks, I believe a more appropriate limit would be in the region of £10,000 per year, and as well as food should be extended to feminine sanitary products and babies' nappies. Moving back to the order paper, this council agrees to write to the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Prime Minister to request that an appropriate scheme is introduced to recognise the monetary value of food donations and to grant gift aid, whether through the retail gift aid scheme, the small gift aid donation scheme, or any other appropriate variant of the main gift aid scheme, on all food donations, along with feminine sanitary products and babies' nappies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heslop. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Members of the Council. I formally second this motion whilst reserving the right to speak. First of all, can I say that I welcome this motion and it would be great to actually see it happen.
Can I just intervene? Do you want to speak now or do you want to reserve the right to speak?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to reserve the right to speak. I wanted to speak now. Sorry about that, Madam.
No, that's absolutely fine. You'll carry on. Yeah.
Right, thank you. Having first-hand experience of working with charities, community groups and individuals in the provision of food and school lunch aid, in Kersley it was wonderful people like Tracy Wilkinson, Bill Ahmed, Almost UK, local businesses and many others who ensured none of our families or children were left behind. Alongside this is the hidden aid that is provided when vulnerable people and families are identified, for example, welfare right advice, signposting, or even support. If nothing else, COVID has highlighted how valuable our community and grassroots groups are. It is community that pull together, community that also know they're vulnerable, and community who ensures that no one slips through the net. And this small token would go a long way. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I have 3 speakers who've indicated to date. Apologies, I was on mute then. 3 speakers. Councillor Cox is the first one.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Can I just say, Madam Mayor, I've dropped out through this. Can you hear me?
I'm afraid you keep going in and out. Try again.
Yeah, I'm having a few IT issues tonight, Madam Mayor. I'll do my best. But if I drop out, call another speaker. I think I want to start off by saying Conservatives are very supportive of charitable giving. I think the in effect to transfer resources.
Councillor Cox, you're dropping out. You might
Yeah. Do you want to call the speaker, Madam Mayor, and I'll try and get in on a different line. Thank you.
Right. Okay, sorry about that, Councillor Cox. Councillor Peel, would you like to try? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Wasn't one of Councillor Cox's best speeches. Our group are going to support this motion. We think it makes absolute sense. There's quite a lot of good points in here, and it's one of those things where you scratch your head and wonder why it's not been done before. It just seems so obvious. The reason I indicated to speak was, as Councillor Heslop knows, Yasmin Qureshi, our MP for Bolton South East, has taken this up on his behalf, and she has contacted the Treasury to lobby for this particular proposal. She has provided me with some information. I'll just read out a part of her argument that supports this motion. Given how vital food banks are to people's survival, it doesn't make sense that gift aid can be applied to clothing, jigsaws, DVDs, knickknacks and other items that are donated to charity shops to sell for good causes, but it cannot be applied to people who buy food to donate to food banks. Surely, if the political will is there, this proposal could be achieved either by extending the retail gift aid scheme or through a new scheme made specifically for this purpose. This would be a great help for food banks, which unfortunately are being relied upon more and more in the UK. I hope that the government will embrace this initiative. Madam Mayor, I couldn't have put the argument better myself. We're very happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peel. Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I find this one of the saddest motions I've heard in council for a long time. Not because I disagree with the principles, I think they're totally laudable, and I'll certainly be voting for it and would urge my group to. The problem is what we're effectively doing with this motion is accepting that food banks will be a long-standing issue in this country. So long-standing, it's going to become part of the taxation system. Now, that to me is extremely sad. We ought to be trying harder to make sure that nobody needs food banks. But anyway, having said that, that's the only bit I wanted to say. I'll certainly be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Cox, oh sorry, Councillor Cox, are you back with us?
I'm back, Madam Mayor. Yeah.
Would you like to try again?
I'll give it another go.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think I started off, I don't know how much of the speech you got, but I started off by saying that Conservatives are very supportive of charitable giving, and we think that gift aiding is an extremely important part of what this country does. But we're not really opposing the sentiment of the motion, but we have got grave reservations about it for what I hope are legitimate reasons. We must perhaps just point out that RGAs can only be applied to goods donated by a UK income taxpayer. The RGA, the Retail Gift Aid Scheme, is administratively burdensome and requires detailed recording and reporting, as RGAs are in effect a tax avoidance scheme. Council shouldn't get too alarmed by that. It is a tax avoidance scheme. There's quite a lot of tax avoidance schemes which are set up by governments for perfectly good reasons. Most people's pension plans are in effect tax avoidance schemes, but it does require, for it to work effectively, a significant relationship between the donor, the shop in this case, and HMRC. Retail gift aid guidance runs to many pages, and compliance is fundamental to its continuance and its credibility. Madam Mayor, the concept of gift aid only works if there is at some point a cash transaction. Without a cash transaction, there is not any tax to recover. For gift aid to work properly and not to be abused, there has to be a transparent and complex relationship between a registered charity and HMRC. Otherwise, a perfectly legitimate tax avoidance scheme could become a very unhealthy tax evasion scheme. Councillor Heslop's proposed relationships. Councillor Heslop's proposal would mean the relationship would be between an individual and HMRC, and it opens up the RGAs to widespread fraud, leading to a loss of public confidence in this vital tax avoidance scheme. Madam Mayor, there is a tax efficient method of donating to food banks, and that is giving cash donation to a registered food charity, ensuring the donation gets the maximum bang for the hard-earned buck of the donor. Madam Mayor, the spirit of what we're saying is not to pour cold water on Councillor Heslop's idea. It's simply to point out that tax advisors, people that are paid to get people to avoid tax, have pointed out time and time again that this sort of scheme is ripe for tax evasion. We think Councillor Heslop is trying to do the right thing, but we fear this good intention could go quickly wrong. And so it's for that reason, Madam Mayor, and that reason alone, that we can't support the motion. Thank you very much. And thank you for your patience.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the Council. The sentiments expressed there by Councillor Cox are absolutely right. The spirit of the motion from Councillor Heslop has a huge amount to commend it, but the complexity of what he is proposing and the longevity of this would make it very difficult. It is feasible to do something about it, but it actually would become potentially more costly for the small food bank than the benefit that they would glean from it because of the interrelationships. Anybody who wants to read the fine print of the legislation will see that that is doable but complex. The fact of the matter is that, as Councillor Cox said, as Conservatives, we are proud to support charities, and gift aid is clearly a huge opportunity through the proper channels. And when we look at organisations like Urban Outreach and the huge amount of work they do with not just the food bank provision of food, but lunches, Christmas dinner on Jesus, a field which they run so successfully, a huge operation. And for the marginal benefit they will glean against the cost that it might incur, I think it will be counterproductive. I think the spirit of the motion is right. Sadly, it isn't a feasible one, a practical one. And for that reason, I would urge those who are taxpayers who want to support food banks to do so in cash, use gifts, legitimate and transparent. And that is the way that all of us as taxpayers ought to be supporting charities such as Urban Outreach and other food banks. I sadly cannot support a motion that good in spirit, fine in concept, but practically not doable at the present time.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Sherrington. Oh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I think about this, I think of John Paul Getty. John Paul Getty, with his millions and millions and millions that he used to make, and he used to actually pay millions and millions and millions out in tax, used to actually give gift to different places like the arts and so on. And it didn't mean that he didn't pay the tax. It's just that he didn't pay the tax to the government. He actually paid it to these particular organisations that he particularly supported. And I think, you know, it's nobody trying to get away with paying, but it just means that they will be paying it to an organisation rather than paying it to the government. So there's no gain to the individual. No gain at all, except that they feel better about their money being spent by charity rather than it going to government. And I'm sure that if we thought of this as being a bit more simplistic rather than the way it is at the moment, which is bureaucratic, and I'm sure that it could be done by people just giving their national insurance number. I'm sure it could be actually done so much simpler than the way it is at the moment, and therefore all sorts of things that we spend our money on could go through to charity rather than going direct to government. And I'm sure that if we've got any brains that are actually in the civil service, in the government, I'm sure they could probably come up with something, we hope, that could be simpler than what we do at the moment. So I will be supporting this on behalf of John Paul Getty. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sherrington. Councillor McKeon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If something is good enough in spirit, it ought to be done. I certainly will be supporting this motion. Councillor Cox mentioned the problem of evasion. I can't imagine tax evaders going into Asda and putting a tin of beans in a basket as a means of tax evasion. The people who put these items in the baskets are very, very ordinary people who I'm sure it never occurs to them to evade tax. I go to one particular charity shop in Horwich, and I give things that we no longer need in the household, and I sign a piece of paper, put my name and address on it, tick that I'm a taxpayer, and the charity collects gift aid. And I think Councillor Haslop is absolutely correct. If I can do that with old clothes and old children's games, then why not with food? Councillor Cox also comments that the Conservative Party is very keen on charity, and of course that's absolutely true. But a just and equal society cannot depend on charity. Prior to the National Health Service, prior to the welfare state, we were dependent an awful lot on charity. When you have a society that's dependent on charity, many people get left out. The people that benefit from charities are the ones that society, in inverted commas, finds acceptable. So many people in our society are on the margins, and without state help, they will not be supported. I very much appreciate Councillor Hayes's comment. It was one I wanted to make. It's extraordinary in this council meeting how often we've mentioned or talked about food banks. How can we, in this society so wealthy, be talking about food banks and talking about them carrying on? It's a national disgrace and a national scandal. We need higher wages, we need higher benefits. Nobody should be dependent on a food bank.
Thank you, Councillor McKeon. Councillor Howarth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members. Yes, when you think about what gift aid is, the fact that it is about money donation, of course, and it is, of course, about sale transaction in charity shops. Yes, there's quite a bit of detail, and some of us are aware of that. And I approached this motion, though, and I'm struck by those words, appropriate variant. And I thought, well, the intention of this motion is really good. And were the Exchequer and the Treasury faced with this request today, I think that they would be aware that Councillor Heslop is coming at this in wanting to have a look at whether there is any kind of appropriate variant. And that's not a bad thing. It would be worth people who, have the capability to have a look at this. The gift aid as a system has struck a councillor in the Bolton Borough as something that he wants to look at and have specialists seek out whether they could do any modelling that comes up with a system that is able to satisfy the sorts of things that Councillor Heslop and others on this call tonight want to see. And on this, I think that's going to be okay for me. I think that's appropriate. That's something that finance staff can have a look at, because really the ask is, can they have a look at whether the principles of gift aid can be applied to product? Of course, I understand that is something of a different thing than money donation and sale transaction. A number of people have spoken about the huge importance of food banks and food assistance in our country at the moment. And I think I'd say this, if it boils down to the Exchequer needing to do some modelling work and that's going to take time, then what about this? It might be something that, Councillor Heslop and others would consider, though, if they get any feedback on a motion or an idea that they send into the Exchequer, which is that the Cabinet Office could consider as a bridging position, offering some finance to the charities, certainly the big charities they work with. We've got some big charities in our country now, and they operate in this borough. They could have a look, could they not, to give them some finance as a bridging gap until this matter could be sorted out and the detail considered. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, and other people have already said this. I really support the intention behind this motion of Councillor Heslop. I think charitable giving is very important, and indeed, as many others do, give money to various charities and to various organisations. But in all the cases that I do, I'm able to prove that I'm a taxpayer, which legitimises the claim and speeds up the process that that exists to help them to claim the extra 25% or whatever it is on top. And I think this is the real sticking point of it, because of the food that you get that we're talking about donating. It's a very, very administratively burdening system that you're actually to put in on top of all the hard work that's done, a lot of it by volunteers in charities, and really, I think that's my problem with it, as with others. I think it's just creating more and more work for those that are trying to give their time freely to such good causes. And I think perhaps the better way to do it would be to try and do an education campaign, as we say about so many other issues, to the public and say, look, if you want to get an extra 25% to the charity that you're trying to help, then certainly put a cash donation in, and at the point of the, if you go into, for instance, a charity shop, that you actually fill in or sign the slip that's with your details, and then it's registered, and they'll be getting the money, similar to people do when you go to church. Different churches, you fill out a declaration form, and it's based that all the money they collect in the collections can get 25% extra on top of that for the churches. Same with the other charities, and even researches like British Heart Foundation, one that I support, and cancer and things like that. So I think we're making a big potential problem, and I've got to say that I'm not convinced. And whilst I think it's a good point, as I've said at the beginning, I'm not convinced that this will actually achieve what Paul wants, because I don't think that HMRC will ultimately go with this. I think a much quicker resolution to this, to get the money to where it's needed, is to go for an education campaign and ask people to make more more actual cash donations. Of course, the organisations receiving them can use them for whatever they deem necessary, including buying food of the right quantity. I mean, if everybody takes lots and lots of one or two particular brands of food in, they can be a glut of that, and it might be more than they need when they actually need other things to distribute to the needy. So again, really appreciate the sentiments in the motion that Councillor Hislop's brought forward here, but I don't think I'm going to support it on this occasion. I just want to make sure that I explain that it's not because I don't think it's the right sentiment. I think there's a better way of doing it, and I think that is an education campaign and get more cash donations and people to sign up the actual exemption slips, so that the charities can get the extra 25% of the money to do what they need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Flitcroft.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just like to start off by saying that I am going to support this motion. I'm not sure if people are aware, but like large supermarkets like Tesco, they give donations direct to the Trussell Trust, bulk donations, and that in turn gets fed down to the local food banks. On top of that, they give a 20% cash equivalent in monetary value to the Trussell Trust to do whatever they decide to do with, and that's done by Tesco's own choice, and I'm sure that other supermarkets do something very similar. With regards to the gift aid on the individual donations, I'm not sure how this can be made to work, but that isn't our decision. Surely that's up to HMRC and the Exchequer to decide if it's workable or not. These food banks should be given the choice. If it is workable, they should be given that ability to implement it. That's it, really. But I will support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flitcroft. Councillor Morgan.
I'll speak, Madam Mayor. I've not got the red square, but I'll speak anyway. I personally know, as probably many of our many councillors who work with charities and are trustees of charities, know that how important gift aid is to the charities we support. I'm lucky to be a trustee of Bolton Hospice, and I know how important it is to us. But gift aid is granted on the sale of something, not a donation. And it would be really difficult to value a donation of a food gift when the same item of food is priced differently in different outlets. So if you say to, like, we're looking at Bolton Hospice, don't think your camera's on. Sorry, can anybody hear me, or am I just talking to myself?
we can hear you, but we can't see you.
Sorry,
Harry,
I can see myself. Because my camera's been playing up this evening, Madam Mayor, so I'll just carry on anyway.
Carry on, we can hear you properly. It's okay.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like, how do you value a donation of a jumper to Bolton Hospice that's been used or whatever? So it'd be a very difficult scheme to administer. And I think Councillor McEwen's been a little bit disingenuous, suggesting people in supermarkets would be the ones to abuse the loophole. So I agree with Councillor Walsh. If you want to make a gift aid, then go and buy something from your local charity or make a cash donation. I think what Councillor Heslop's suggesting, the sentiment of it is really good, but I think for charities to administer this would be really, really difficult. So I'm not going to support the motion, but I do thank Councillor Heslop for the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Morgan. Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I admire Councillor Heslop's motion. I do think, though, the beauty of a food bank is that we are asking members of the public to put something extra in their shopping basket, and at the end we're asking it to drop off at another shopping basket, which is it's easy to do. There's no kind of signing donation forms, there's no requirement to fill in your self-assessment return at the end of the year, which would be a requirement if it was part of gift aid. And I think that something like this could actually really hinder the process and also the donation process. I think that food banks and charities still have the option and the ability to ask for cash donations, which can be affiliated and associated with gift aid. So it isn't that option isn't there, it's just that at this moment in time, for the process of people for the donation, the receipt, and also then the just giving, which is there's no monetary value in terms of the person that's receiving, which I think that's another issue as well. So even though I really admire your motion, I think the reality of it is very different, and I think that's quite a difference between the groups that have spoken tonight, in that we as Conservatives, we really do appreciate what you're saying, and we appreciate the community stepping up and standing forward and supporting each other, but that we understand the mechanisms that go underneath the ask that you're given. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Heslop, do you want to use your right of reply?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I would. It's been a very interesting debate, and I really would like to thank everybody that's participated every member that's participated in the debate. I think what I've put emphasis on is the retail gift aid scheme. And what I want to just mention is if the other part of the gift aid scheme, which is the small donation scheme, essentially when a charity submits its return at its main gift aid scheme, you know, with all those names and postcodes on and how much they paid under the main gift aid scheme, they also make a declaration, and they could say that, you know, we certify that we've received £8,000 in donations, cash donations during the year, and this is the date that we banked them. And this then enables that charity to get the £2,000 back off HMRC. Now, whatever scheme's introduced, given the arguments that many members have said, I know that Martin made reference to the RGA, the Retail Gift Aid Scheme. What I would suggest is, if it is part of the submitting your main gift aid claim, you know, as the treasurer of a charity or a food bank, you say that I declare that this charity received £10,000 in food or sanitary products from the public, could be via the supermarkets, or it could have been dropped off in this financial year, and I therefore wish to claim £2,000 in gift aid. That's under the small donation scheme. So there is a very, very simple mechanism in place that could be implemented under the small donation scheme, under the umbrella of the main gift aid scheme. I think it's quite simple that there's a declaration. Now, the HMRC already has checks in place, and they can audit them. I mean, I'm not so sure what Councillor Cox was saying about the fraud bit. I mean, it's not the person that submits the claim. It is a registered charity that is registered on the UK with the Charities Commission, who is also registered with HMRC, that makes a declaration of the total amount of cash donations that they've received. I simply wanted this perhaps extending, if it can't be accommodated under the RGA, maybe it's a small donation scheme, or even some other variant of the gift aid scheme, and that's what I'm getting at. Thanks. I mean, as I said, there's been some really good input. I mean, there's been justification on mainly the Conservatives' part of why they disagree with it. I think there's counter arguments. I would, on reflection, to be honest, gone more along the gift aid small donation scheme. I know I'd aim for more than 2,000, but £2,000 a year would certainly help these food banks on a simple declaration that they've received food from the public in excess of £8,000 per year. Perhaps, maybe, if I could have gone along that route and, articulated that argument with members, that I may have got the support of the Conservative members. But thank you anyway for the debate.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Heslop. Chief Executive will now take a named vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, Councillor Baines.
Against.
Councillor Connor.
Against.
Councillor Cox.
Against.
Councillor Cunningham.
Against.
Councillor Dean.
Against.
Councillor Fairclough.
Against.
Councillor Fletcher.
Against.
Councillor Galloway.
Against.
Councillor Greenhouse.
Against.
Councillor Haslam.
Against.
Councillor Hewitt.
Against.
Councillor Morgan.
Against.
Councillor Muslim.
Against.
Councillor Parkinson.
Against.
Councillor Radcliffe.
Against.
Councillor Walsh.
Against.
Councillor Warren.
Against.
Councillor Wild.
Against.
Councillor Abdullah.
For.
Councillor Alia.
For.
Councillor Ayub.
For.
Councillor Donaghy.
For.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor Howarth.
For.
Councillor Ibrahim.
For.
Councillor Karam.
For.
Councillor McKeon.
For.
Councillor Mistry.
For.
Councillor Morris.
For.
Councillor Murray.
For.
Councillor Peel.
For.
Councillor Sherrington.
For.
Councillor Sylvester.
For.
Councillor Zaman. Councillor Zaman, are you muted?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bagnall.
For.
Councillor Eckersley Fallon.
For.
Councillor Hayes.
For.
Councillor McGeehan.
For.
Councillor Newell.
For.
Councillor Vivers.
For.
Councillor Wilkinson.
For.
Councillor Flitcroft.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Sanders.
For.
Councillor Weatherby.
For.
Councillor Darvish.
For.
Councillor Ishmael.
For.
Councillor McMulkin.
For.
Councillor Brady.
For.
Councillor Wright.
For.
Councillor Heslop.
For.
Councillor Waters.
For.
Councillor Gibbon. Councillor Gibbon, are you muted?
For the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Gibbon. Councillor Hornby.
For.
Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Bullock.
Against.
Councillor Cunliffe.
For.
Members, the motion is carried. Madam Mayor, the next item of business is to consider a motion in the name of council appeal relating to the budget setting process.
Councillor Peel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're coming to the end.
6:30 tomorrow morning.
Please restart the clock. I'll continue. We're coming to the end of 2020, and I think there's not a person here who will not be glad to see the back of this year. It's been a truly challenging year. It's been challenging for our NHS, our care workers, our blue light services, for our people, but not least it's been challenging for our council workers and the services that they provide. Unfortunately for us and for our fantastic workers, for whatever reason, we don't get and never really have been given the credit for being one of the most efficient parts of the public sector and one of the most able to respond to the challenge in cases of emergencies like this. We accept in a kind of stoic manner that we do not get put on the pedestal of media acclaim in the way that our brilliant NHS does and rightly deserves to. But that does not alter the fact that council workers across the country, including Bolton, have been at the forefront of the fight against COVID. We cannot therefore with any seriousness accept without a fight that those same care workers we have clapped must lose their jobs because of this artificial and temporary budget problem. We cannot accept the absurdity that public health, without whom the country and the government will be truly on their knees, has excess funding that it doesn't really need and can be easily shed. The same can be said of adult social care and life-changing and life-saving children's services, amongst others. It is a nonsense argument. We have been at the forefront of 10 years of austerity, suffering more than most parts of the public sector. And councils have been the victims of their own success sometimes by giving the impression that they have coped. The truth is councils haven't coped. And the truth is that the last 10 years have stripped away the resilience of the average local council to be able to withstand this latest and deadliest of forced cuts. The government knows full well that we are not living in normal times. COVID has affected jobs, small, large and medium businesses, and the government, in fairness, has responded to this in quite an unprecedented and radical way. It has stepped in to save some jobs, not all. It has stepped in to save some businesses, not all, but it has stepped in. It has borrowed massive amounts of money to do this. And why did it respond in this way? Because it knows that the economic downturn would have been much worse had it not done so. And it also knows that this is an entirely man-made recession due to the removal of vast sums of individual spending power due to lockdowns. With this in mind, the government knows that spending power will return post-pandemic and the economy will bounce back quite quickly. So if the government was and is prepared to accept this economic argument, then it surely must accept the argument we are putting forward in this motion. The motion is a simple ask. It points out to the government its own arguments and asks only for the same leeway to be given to local councils as it gives to itself. It makes the case that it is short-sighted to cut tens of millions out of the budget, losing hundreds of jobs based upon a very misleading short-term approach. It points out what the government already knows, that our budget crisis for 2021 is massively influenced and largely made up of new one-off costs related to the COVID pandemic, as well as a temporary loss of income. Budget crisis is also very much influenced by the longer term effects of COVID on adult social care and other services. Now, I accept that the government has indeed changed some of the rules, allowing us to spread some loss of income over 3 years. So it's already made that symbolic leap, but we feel it needs to go much further. The law says that all councils are required to set a balanced budget each year, but we strongly feel that the extraordinary circumstances leading to these biggest ever cuts means that the law should change. This would be a sensible and pragmatic way forward, which would save many councils from going bankrupt. Madam Mayor, I know this is not a panacea to all our problems, and I'm not arguing that. But what I can say is that for the government to stick rigidly to the notion that it can spend beyond its means due to the extraordinary circumstances, but the council cannot, is an argument that makes no moral, logical or financial sense. Finally, Madam Mayor, I'm not sure if the government would give this motion, if passed, more than a cursory glance. But whether it is passed tonight or not, I say this to the leader of the council, and I repeat my offer that I made at Cabinet. This would just be the first step in what should be a campaign to get them to change the rules, working with local authorities, our members of parliament, the LGA, etc. I will certainly do my part in that and do as much as I am able to do to get the government to make what is a simple yet vital change to the rules that will help us, other local authorities, hundreds and thousands of council staff across the country, and ultimately people's services. Madam Mayor, I hope all members will support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Peel. Councillor Zaman to second the motion.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I formally second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Zaman. I have 3 speakers to date. The first one is Councillor Cox. Are you receiving us, Councillor Cox?
Receiving you loud and clear, Madam Mayor.
Over and out then.
Thank you. I'll give it another go. I mean, I've listened to Councillor Peel with much interest there, and in some ways, I wish he'd gone into a bit more detail as what change he asked for the Local Government Finance Act to be suspended. I would have liked to have heard a bit more detail as precisely what it is he would like the council to do, because I would be genuinely, interested in it, and maybe he can address that when he comes back. But I have to say, Madam Mayor, I like the sentiment of the motion, and I think many in the Conservative group like it too. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated the centralised nature of the British state leads to poor local outcomes. Notwithstanding the fact the government has allowed us, I think Councillor Peel did refer to that, the government has lightened the rules a little bit and has allowed us to spread what is a £12 million loss this year over the next 3 years. It's a £12 million loss in capital, in council tax and business rates, but it is allowing us to spread it over 3 years, and it does mean that our target next year has been reduced by, well, it's 8 million lower than it would have been. What has begun to concern me over the last few years really is the huge disparity that's beginning to occur between our capital account and our revenue account. I suspect over the next 12 months, particularly if some of the bids that we've made come in, our capital account will never be as big as it is over the next 12 months. And yet, as Councillor Peel and many others have pointed out, our revenue budget is under extreme pressure. Now, that's come about because many of the services that we provide through our revenue budget are not of great, I don't think they're of particular great interest to Whitehall. What they like to do is come in as a charger on a white horse and say, we're giving you X million pounds to do this or that or the other. And as I say, I think it's leading to an enormous disparity between what we can spend on our capital account and what we can spend on our revenue account. And I think if it is one of Council Appeal's aspirations for more flexibility between those two accounts, I, for one, and I'm sure many other Conservatives would quite happily support that. I just want to make some reference. We don't quite know where the penny has landed on our finances, and what we had at Cabinet the other day was a budget report. It wasn't a budget. The Chancellor in his statement has indicated that further support in his spending brew will be forthcoming, and we will learn more details of that in the next few weeks. Just one bone of contention I've got with Council Appeal. I don't think it is right to compare local government finances with government finances. The government has got the ability, when it gets into financial difficulties, of printing money. Not something I'm a great fan of, but it is a different animal and a different beast, and I think that comparing the two is not always helpful. But I don't want to end on a sour note, because I think what can certainly the spirit of what Council Appeal is saying is one that a number of us would agree with. The British state is too centralised. It makes too many decisions at the centre. There's a lack of flexibility at a local level, and if that's what Council Appeal's motion is all about, then I'm quite happy to support it, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. An interesting motion, and one really where we're talking about principles and not what the government has done to local government, and it's right that we shouldn't. I was interested in Councillor Cox's comments about the Whitehall not being very interested in many of the services that local government supplies, and also that the state is too centralised. I almost thought for a second we were getting an application to rejoin the Liberal Democrats, but perhaps not. He's a bit too right-wing for us nowadays, which is a great pity, because he's a good lad, basically. I've got to say, we would be very happy to support this motion, because it is an interesting concept that I think does deserve to be looked at in a lot more detail. We're in favour of balanced budgets, but we've got to accept, I think everybody does, these are extraordinary, almost unique times. Unlike the government, unfortunately, we can't print money. Neither have we got the mythical money tree available. That seems to flourish more in Irish soil than over here, but it's not available to us. Council Appeal predicts that when COVID is under control, the economy will recover sharply. I hope so, but I've got two concerns about that. Firstly, I believe our loss of income may even be worse than was forecast. We've suffered further lockdowns since the forecast was done. More businesses and council taxpayers are struggling, and some experts are predicting a third wave of COVID after Christmas. We know the airport was expecting a return to normality in January, when they originally asked us for help. Now, that's looking extremely unlikely. And secondly, it's not just COVID, Brexit's happening at the same time. Now, whatever the views are Brexit are, most people do admit there are risks to our economy, deal or no deal on that. However, those reservations, I think, make it even more important that we ask the government to try and take a more pragmatic approach. If we are allowed to balance out our budgets over a number of years, I think we'd be able to cope far more. The danger is we will need to make a lot more cuts than would be necessary if we looked over a longer term. I think it's not just in the interests of this authority and all its inhabitants that we do that. I think actually it's also in the interest of the government we do. So I also would urge members to support the motion, and that we should try and get the support of the LGA, other local authorities and of our MPs. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. Councillor Newell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I must admit, when I first saw this motion by it, because reading it, I couldn't really see why Councillor Peel would proffer a deficit budget. So I did some research, and it is very interesting, and I'd just like to share a few things that I found whilst researching the different types of budgets. As Councillor Peel says, the law says that we have to produce a balanced budget. But there are three main faults with a balanced budget. One, it's unviable at times of recession and doesn't offer any solution to specific problems, for example, employment. It limits the scope of economic growth and it restricts spending on public welfare. A deficit budget is especially helpful at times of recession, and what we're going through now, these special circumstances, are the kind of circumstances that I think a deficit budget would benefit, because it helps to generate additional demand and boost the rate of growth. Excessive expenditure can improve the employment rate, which then results in an increase in demand for goods and services, which in turn helps to revive an economy. The merits of a deficit budget include helping to address public concerns at times of recession. And it is not a sign of inefficiency to run a deficit budget. Rather, it's just that the receipts are less than expenditure. And this can be seen as a positive thing, as it means spending on things like infrastructure. But I suppose whether you like that kind of spending, that depends on your ideology, I suppose. The demerits of a deficit budget is that it can encourage imprudent expenditure and increase the burden on government. But government debt is never paid off, it's merely managed, and that is the trick that the government have to handle, is to manage the debt efficiently. And this analogy that is used all the time of our national debt being some kind of credit card that's maxed out is a very poor one, because it bears no resemblance to how public finance is run. And just a few little facts and figures. Since 1970-71, the government has only had a surplus in 6 years, and the annual deficit since 1970 has been 3.4% of GDP. But in 2009-2010, public borrowing peaked at 10.1% of GDP, which was 158 billion, and that was in response to the global banking crisis. The IFS projection for 2021, the deficit ranges from an optimistic view of 345 billion, which is 16.7% of GDP, to 367 billion, which is 18.9%, and that's a more pessimistic view. The central projection for our national debt is 351 billion, which is 17.1% of GDP. Prior to the pandemic, the projection was 55 billion, which is 2.4%. So we can see from that just how dire our straits are. Our world has changed, our finances have changed, so perhaps it's time that we ask the Chancellor and the government to offer a change to how the finances at local government level is run. So I'm happy to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newell. Councillor Donaghy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will try and be brief. As colleagues have already said, these are unprecedented times that we are living through. The effect of the COVID virus, not only on our town, but on the country as a whole, has been quite frankly devastating. But the government, to their credit, have stepped in. They have thought the unthinkable, and they have thought outside the box to address the problem. And by and large, they have tried to do their best to help in these, as I've said, extraordinary circumstances. each and every councillor on the on Bolton Council, and it doesn't matter what your political persuasion is, none of us came to this council to damage our town, to damage the services, and indeed to damage the great council that we have and the delivery of services that we provide to our people. When we looked at what the impacts of the one-off removal of funds to balance the books in the first year would be, it quite frankly would reduce our council to nothing more than a husk. Therefore, we are asking the government, with this resolution from Councillor Peel, to go the extra mile, to say, look, we've come this far. I think the LGA have said for local authorities to balance the books, it's around £7 billion. Now, again, £7 billion is no small sum, but as Councillor Cox pointed out to the Cabinet, we are talking now of printing money up to date of over £386 billion, possibly 400 billion for the year. So quite frankly, when you are at those levels of printing money in the economy, you've crossed the Rubicon, and your other 7 billion really is neither here nor there. But if it can help out in these difficult circumstances for local authorities, and we're not saying we're not going to pay this back, of course we are, and we are aware of our fiduciary duties in setting a balanced budget, and we are aware of our obligation to the citizens of this town, because of course we hold their money. It's public money, it isn't our money, it's public money. But because we care about the citizens of this town, because we care about the services we provide passionately, because we care about the job security of our staff within the authority, we are asking the government to go the extra mile, to give us the flexibility to spread the pain over, as has been suggested, a 5-year period, so that when the economy does bounce back, and I'm sure it will, we will be in a much stronger position to deal with these great financial matters that now assail us. I ask the Council to please support Councillor Peel's motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Donaghy. Councillor Howarth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members. So the motion is asking for this key thing, which is that we can have deficit budgets in local government. And the first thing to note is that the government have shown that they can do strategic change actions in extraordinary times, like we're living through in COVID. So all that is needed is on the matter of fundamental change to the legalities of council budgets. To do this, to allow councils to have deficit budgets, is the political will to do it. It's the will of the government that we're looking for to let this go forward. Is there already support for this? Yes, there is. Sigoma, the finance chief, made a submission to the spending review, and there's some detail on by a senior individual who understands all of these finance matters, making the case that we're in a good place for this to be the direction of travel. It's a change. Local government has lived within its current financial regime for some time. There's a change management system required for this, but it is the case is made by on behalf of Sigoma that now is the time for this to be progressed by government. For me, it's not a surprise that it's a group leader in the north of England that is asking for this, because there has, when you look across the finance, been some gross inequality, and we talked about some of this at the beginning of the meeting tonight, and that's why we are facing such difficulties in this council on the finance, and why we are looking for really sensible financial solutions to support councils through these extraordinarily difficult times. It was mentioned about the difference between national government and local government finance. However, the other thing to note, of course, is that there are other parts of the public sector that already have the ability. They're not restricted in the way that local councils are to this yearly sign off and a complete inability to take forward deficits or even have debt written off in any way. And we've got institutions that operate in the Bolton Borough that have more freedom and that have had more assistance from government on their finances. So I would put that forward as something that balances out that argument about the fact that, well, national government can operate in ways because they've got systems to raise taxes, or as I think it was mentioned, they've got systems with the Bank of England to make money and support the economy. We're also in a difficult financial position because I would say, talking about that national system, finance in the country has not really been being managed as particularly well as we would like. We've had some finance to councils, we've had some finance to, from the government to help support the public, but many of us are quite shocked, and we have serious problems with money that's been spent that we've not seen good return on. Things like the millions that went on equipment that we didn't get a good return on that were purchased in the country. Problems with the phone app where millions were spent on that and we didn't get a good return. Problems where there's been funding and delays on track and trace. So these are some of the issues that are putting enormous stress on councils today. And that's why this motion is coming forward to look for a really sensible and appropriate way to get some change from government to help councils out that are facing these tremendously awful cuts today in the Bolton Borough. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Councillor Brady.
It's not gone red. Okay, I'll start anyway. I just want to thank Councillor Peel for bringing this motion. I think it's very relevant to this council, our employees and all our residents, so I'm perfectly happy to support it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, you caught me unaware. Caught me unawares then.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Councillor Howard, do you want to turn your camera off? Thank you. Right, thank you, Councillor Brady. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I am going to support this motion, and I'm happy to support this motion. I'm very pleased to see the recognition from quite a few of the councils across the piece, the efforts that have been made by government to try and give support where it's needed in the highly unprecedented times we find ourselves in. And for the comments about things that were done wrong and things that were spent wrong, again, I go back to it. These are unprecedented times. Mistakes are always made. It's always been, you know, it's great looking back in hindsight. We can all be millionaires in hindsight, but you know, people have to deal with things as they see at the time. More or less, I think they've done probably as well as could be expected, whatever the government of the day would be. I think really some comfort. We do know these are huge sums of money that are involved, as quite rightly has been said, but of course that's not just in Britain. This is across the, you know, there's a fiscal reset being pressed across the entire globe here. So it's not that we're in any particularly any worse position than anybody else. The whole playing field has been moved. So if in comparison to other countries, we're probably still more or less where we were, but just to a lower level down the fiscal ladder for everybody. And I think I'd agree with Councillor Donaghy. I think he had it absolutely right there. You know, you might as well be hung for a sheep as a lamb. We've got to deal with this, and the money that's needed it is a drop in the ocean compared with the overall size of the problem. But yes, I will certainly be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Greenhalgh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think you'll all have gathered the Conservative group will be supporting this motion tonight. I think we had a mini discussion of this in Cabinet. And clearly, you know, I think opposition parties will not be surprised to hear that, you know, we've asked as the administration on a number of occasions, you know, can we find a way of spreading this over a number of years, bearing in mind the points that have been made by colleagues and members of the chamber on, you know, that we're hoping that the economy will bounce back. I mean, I hope Councillor Peel is absolutely right, and I hope it is quick. I think and to be able to spread that over a period of time and not make the level of cuts that we face today and over the coming months would of course be beneficial to us all, and to be able to spread that burden and not to do it. I think what we have to bear in mind, though, is I think we have to almost create an open book to government as to say to us, this is the predicament. This is not unlike the letters that have already gone off to government, actually, but an open to say to government, this is our predicament. We want to spread it over a number of years. Can you find a mechanism whereby you can make this happen, whether that's enabling us to use some capital in terms of some revenue as one-offs, using them and converting it to revenue, whether that is possible or even legal or something that can be changed within legislation. Whether it's what we don't want to do for us is to defer, because we are facing some of these cuts this year in the forthcoming year of budget because of savings that were deferred from previous years. So we are, as has been said, we face a perfect storm. But of course, if we can do anything to persuade government to spread this over a period of time, using whatever mechanism is in place, a payback scheme of over a number of years, where we would hope that because the economy was growing, that was a lesser amount, and therefore we saved and actually managed to reduce the number of savings we were having to make, then of course that is beneficial to us. And so I absolutely will endorse this. Government are getting a lot of communication from us at the moment regarding this, but I'm happy for them to get a further piece and a further request from the council, asking for mechanisms to be put in place. And I'm happy to be prescriptive in that letter, but I'm happy to work also with Councillor Peel and other party leaders to find a wording which, if possible, creates a more open invitation for government to come up with some options that can help us. Because clearly, nobody, as Councillor Donaghy pointed out, wants to be in a position of having to deliver the level of savings that we are having to deliver in 1 year, which is monumental and puts not only our staff in a very unfair position in the instability and the uncertainty of what is waiting for them, but also puts us as politicians having to deliver these savings in an awful position. This is, as Councillor Donaghy said, not what we went into politics to do, and therefore the principle, of course, is for us one that we are happy to lobby, as we have been doing, waiting to see the settlement, but also lobbying for, if it needs change in legislation, to enable us to share this out over a number of years. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Greenosh. Councillor Zaman, do you wish to exercise your right to speak now?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. There is no doubt in our mind that the local authority is in serious financial difficulty due to COVID-19 and other cost, loss of income pressures, and we've got to take the appropriate action. Our argument is that the proposal to cut local authority budget by 39 million in 1 year is not the appropriate action. And make no mistake about this, if this happens, this is the beginning of the end of local government in Bolton as we see it today. It doesn't get any clearer than that. What we are saying is quite simple, and what we are asking for is no different from what the government itself routinely does when its own with its own finances, which is to not set a balanced budget, as we have seen again with the spending review. The COVID-related financial crisis has led to councils across the country facing billions of cuts in 1 year. As a result, a number of local authorities are increasingly warning of impending bankruptcy. A large part of this 39 million cut in Bolton is nothing to do with any argument that the council deliberately spends beyond its means, but has everything to do with new but one-off costs related to COVID pandemic, as well as a temporary loss of income. Whilst the government have provided some extra money and have allowed us to spread out a small part of the additional costs, as mentioned by Councillor Cox, it does not go anywhere near what is needed. The law as it stands requires all councils to set a balanced budget each year, but we strongly feel that the extraordinary circumstances leading to these biggest ever cuts means that the law should change. And this would be a sensible and pragmatic way forward, which would save many councils from going bankrupt, and is exactly what the government itself is doing with its own budget. As Councillor Peel outlined, most economists argue that the recession we are heading into is largely artificial and that the economy will quickly bounce back, which will mean in a couple of years the council's income will be back to where it was and COVID-related spending virtually ended. It is short-sighted to cut tens of millions out of the budget, losing hundreds of jobs based upon a very misleading short-term approach. If the government gave the green light to not having to set a balanced budget, it will allow us to plan ahead properly over the next few years, which will undoubtedly save services and save jobs. I hope other members of the council will support us in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zaman. The Chief Executive, oh sorry, forgot. I nearly forgot you, Councillor Peel.
Thank you.
I was so enthralled with the debate, I forgot all about you. Okay, Councillor Peel, would you like to use your right to reply now?
I would, Madam Mayor, and I think I'm also going to take some credit for this being the shortest council meeting people can remember in a long time. You know, not finished for 10 o'clock for a while. I want to thank all of the previous speakers, everybody who spoke. I personally thought the quality of debate on this was excellent. When we first started this this motion, and it wasn't recent, it was some time ago, we did think it might be a bit ambitious. Certainly, if we'd have brought something like this in last year, pre-COVID, I don't think it would have got off the ground. Circumstances have changed. People are thinking differently. The government's thinking differently, and everybody was at one at pointing this out that change times need to lead to change attitudes by the government. I want to, in particular, thank Councillor Greenosh, because he is the leader of the council, and he does have a lot more clout than I have or my group has in terms of pushing forward an agenda such as this. And as I said, I would support that agenda as much as possible. I'd only hope Councillor Greenhosh hasn't upset the government too much in terms of his criticism of the handling of COVID. But again, we have always supported that balanced approach. To answer a couple of the questions, yeah, Councillor Hayes is right. I personally think, and who knows, but I personally think the mistakes the government are making with how they handle issues of lockdown will lead to a third rise. I only hope that and possibly a third lockdown. I only hope that the vaccine can actually overtake that. That's why the motion doesn't call for everything to be settled within a couple of years. I've given a 5-year period, and I'm particularly grateful that people have put the meat on the bones of this motion, which I wanted. I wanted it to be an open sheet so that people could put the meat on the bones. In particular, Councillor Howarth, Councillor Newell started panning it out a bit with some ideas. So I think what we're doing tonight is a bold step, a bold idea, and I'm really pleased it's being taken forward. So I do thank everybody, and I think I'm probably the last speaker of this year, so I hope everybody has a much better 2021 next year. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Peel. The Chief Exec will now take a named vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Here we go, councillors. Councillor Baines?
4.
Councillor Connor?
4.
Councillor Cox?
4.
Councillor Cunningham?
4.
Councillor Dean?
4.
Councillor Fairclough?
4.
Councillor Fletcher?
4.
Can we just ask councillors who have voted turn their microphones off, because we get terrible feedback. I think it was Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Galloway?
4.
Councillor Greenhouse?
4.
Councillor Haslam?
4.
Councillor Hewitt?
4.
Councillor Morgan?
4.
Councillor Muslim?
4.
Councillor Parkinson?
4.
Councillor Radcliffe?
4.
Councillor Walsh?
4.
Councillor Warren?
4.
Councillor Wild?
4.
Councillor Abdullah?
4.
Councillor Adia?
4.
Councillor Ayub?
4.
Councillor Donaghy?
4.
Councillor Evans?
4.
Councillor Howarth?
4.
Councillor Ibrahim?
4.
Councillor Iqbal? Councillor Iqbal?
4.
Thank you very much. Councillor Karam?
4.
Councillor McKeon?
4.
Councillor Mistry?
4.
Councillor Morris?
4.
Councillor Murray?
4.
Councillor Peel?
4.
Councillor Sherrington?
4.
Councillor Sylvester?
4.
Councillor Zaman?
4.
Councillor Bagnall?
4.
Councillor Eckersley Fallon?
4.
Councillor Hayes?
4.
Councillor McGeehan?
4.
Councillor Newell?
4.
Councillor Beavers?
4.
Councillor Wilkinson?
4.
Councillor Flitcroft?
4.
Councillor Patterson?
4.
Councillor Sanders?
4.
Councillor Weatherby?
4.
Councillor Darvish?
4.
Councillor Ishmael?
4.
Councillor McMulkin?
4.
Councillor Brady?
4.
Councillor Wright?
4.
Councillor Heslop?
4.
Councillor Waters?
4.
Councillor Gibbon.
4.
Councillor Hornby.
4.
Councillor Allen.
4.
Councillor Bullock.
4.
Councillor Cunliffe.
4.
The motion is carried. Madam Mayor, that concludes the business of the council.
Before you all go, as it is the last council meeting of the year, and could I just wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and let's hope it's going to be a lot healthier next year. And I look forward to the day when I do not have to sit in this council chamber on my own, just with the help of officers. If you could really just have a look at us now, we really are Billy No Mates. So looking forward to seeing you all again in the new year, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Good night.
Happy Christmas, Madam Mayor.
Happy Christmas, Madam Mayor.